Hello, welcome to the BroadCAST webinar series from the UNL Center for Academic Success and Transition. I'm Dan Hutt, and we couldn't be more delighted to have with us today from his home in New York, Semisonic drummer and author Jacob Slichter. Jake, it is a tremendous honor to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dan. It's really good to see you, and I'm really grateful for the chance to talk with everybody.
It's been some time since we last talked, and the students are older now.
Okay.
Our last interview was in a freshman high school class in Pawnee City, Nebraska, about 15 years ago.
Well, I'm older too, so
all of us are,
I think it's going to work out well.
Okay, Jake, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. You are part of my own personal holy trinity of pop. It goes the Beach Boys, the Beatles, and then the whole Minneapolis family of Semisonic, Shakespeare, the New Standards, the orchestra. All of that is in part of the arch triumvirate of pop for me. So it's really a personal honor to have you here today.
Awesome. Cool.
And you are the first non-Nebraskan in our webinar series, but a Midwesterner nonetheless, right?
Yes, definitely a Midwesterner.
Okay. Jake, I'm going to be referring frequently in our talk today to your excellent book, So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, and which I understand remains an excellent stocking stuffer as we approach the holidays right now. So students, straighten up and fly right. It's not too late to turn around the semester, and we'll see. So
that's right. Get on Dan's nice list.
That's right. All right. Well, Jake, I think we'll start, if we may, with the advent of your college career. And I know that you first studied at the Berklee College of Music and then transferred to Harvard. And I'm going to sprinkle in some student questions as well as we go today. And I'll reference where these students are from, almost everyone from Nebraska in our group, but myself and Charlotte of Omaha and Frank of Pender would like to know more about how you landed at those big time schools. And in your book, you indicate Harvard as a place for which I was poorly prepared and which in every regard had annihilated my self-confidence. Would you speak more about that?
Yeah. So actually what happened was I enrolled at Harvard as a freshman, and I had such a alienating first year as a freshman that I decided to take a year away from Harvard to go to Berklee Music School, which was in Boston. So I'd get to stay in touch with the friends I was making at Harvard, but I'd get to sort of just pour myself into music and into the particular kind of very nuts and bolts kind of music education that they offer at Berklee. I had been taking private lessons with a composition teacher at Berklee during the spring of my freshman year. So that's what sort of had won me over to that plan. The way I ended up at Harvard was as a legacy. My dad went to Harvard. My grandfather taught there. And I think this is an under-discussed phenomenon. Elite schools, a lot of the people who go there are not necessarily elite students. I think I was a good student, but by no means an elite student. So I think my ticket through the gates of Harvard was probably my last name more than my first name, and anything I had done of particular merit. I think that one of the things that really now it's interesting because I think that one of the things that Harvard does is it tries to convince you that you're one of the best, and if you're here, you must be among the very best, which is complete nonsense. But I think that at the time, that kind of talk and things I was learning about myself really collided together to give me a kind of a really intense dose of imposter syndrome. And in fact, even to this day, I have imposter syndrome. So I think that was a big part of what made college such a tough experience for me. And I think imposter syndrome is something that students everywhere and people in jobs and positions in any number of circumstances feel like they are the wrong person. So I think this is a pretty common phenomenon.
Right, right. And it's kind of a segue to a whole slew of students here, Jake, are really interested to know about your decision to major in Afro-American studies and history, specifically Abdullah of Lincoln, Sam of Harrison, Ashton of La Vista, Bryn of Indianapolis, Alex of North Platte, Logan of Franklin, Kanai of Gretna, and Tyson of Hastings all want to know what was behind your decision. And you mentioned in the book that you wandered from major to major, eventually settling on Afro-American studies, where you quietly explored your interests in race, politics, music, and literature. I'm really interested in how that came about.
Well, I had started out thinking I was going to be a music major. But then the Harvard Music Department had told me they were going to give me credit for Berklee, and then I went and did Berklee, and I aced it, and I came back, and they decided to change their mind, and I was just so furious that I left the music department, and I thought, well, now what am I going to do? And I did a year in the English department because I thought, well, I like writing, maybe that's what I should be doing. And then I realized that if I wanted to graduate with honors, I would have to take a literature class in a foreign language. Like I'd have to read a bunch of novels in French or German or something like that. And I thought, oh man, I'm never gonna be able to do that. And I was sort of like, I need to sort of find something that feels more relevant to my sort of life right now. And the thing that just really felt the most important was Afro-American studies. It was, I don't know, race has always been a huge issue in this country. And since I was a little kid, a big issue in my life. And Black music, Black writers, Black intellectuals, all had such a sort of disproportionately large influence on my outlook that it just felt like, yeah, this is what I want to study. I want to know more about this. This just feels like the most important thing of all of the choices before me. So that's what I did.
I'm aware of your unique upbringing in Champaign, where you were bused to the Black side of town and grew up listening to and playing funk music and really immersed in Afro-American culture since you were a kid in that way. Kira of Rising City asks if you ever felt any of that as if you didn't belong in your major, but I suspect that maybe you felt a belonging for a long time. Am I wrong about that?
Well, I think they're both correct.
Okay.
I think that, for instance, I think that there is a thing with, like, for instance, white people studying Afro-American studies. There's a voyeuristic aspect of it. And there can be an appropriative aspect to it where people want to come in and kind of get the goods and then take them elsewhere and sort of make something out of it. And I think that's
a colonialist aspect.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's problematic. And I think that, as a white person, I had to really sort of think about that and wrangle with, like, okay, what parts of me are sort of like, what are my motives? I think it's always a question you have to keep asking yourself. So I would, at the same time, I would say that just my personal experience was that the Black spaces, so Afro-American studies is a Black space. And if you're a white person in a Black space, then you have to do some research and do some learning and listening about what might be expected of you, and in fact, when are times when you actually might not, when it would be good for you to not be there.
Mm-hmm.
So those were important things for me. I would say that I'm still learning about all this. And I think one of the things that, like, hanging out with a lot of Black friends, playing in Black bands, being an Afro-American studies major, one of the things that all of that revealed to me was that, like, I have racism in me and I have to deal with it. And I think that so I refer to myself as like a recovering racist. I would say that I am someone who's like, um, uh, I'm anti-racist, but I'm also someone who has to acknowledge that, well, a lot of that programming is actually deep inside of me in such a way that it's kind of like being an alcoholic. Like, you don't have to drink to be an alcoholic. And in fact, part of recovery for a lot of alcoholics involves just constantly acknowledging, oh no, I've got some stuff inside of me that I have to continue to wrangle with. So I feel that way about race, about, I call myself a recovering all kinds of things, a sexist, transphobe, homophobe, all of the things. And it's not because I'm out there campaigning, like actively working against them. I think it's actually the first step in taking the other tack of like being trying to ally myself to other people's lives and be there for them. The first step in that is to sort of open myself up and say, okay, in what ways are these problems alive in me?
Absolutely. Jake, what do you think about college, your undergraduate years in particular, as a time to academically experiment, test the waters, maybe even get a little bit lost as you discern your pathway in life?
I fully support that. That was not how I experienced it, but I think there's two ways to sort of think about what college might be. One is a performance space where you enact mastery and you demonstrate mastery. And that was my experience in college, and I hated it. I think the other way to go is that it's a learning space. It's a space for learning. It's a space for wiping out and making mistakes and trying new things and conducting experiments, some of which fail abysmally and others which may succeed improbably, and to treat not only college but life as a classroom, not as a stage. Where or like the Olympics, where you're supposed to stick the landing every time. Like, you can't go through life doing that and expect to grow.
I love that. Too often, teaching is referred to in the performative aspect in that sense. This is the first time I've really thought about it in the sense how disingenuous that is. Now, as an art student, I've always thought, Jake, that the student that majors in music or theater or art, that's a different mindset than the student that majors in business or biology or economics or whatnot. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but those pathways entail a lot less professional peril, ostensibly at least. And I've always thought the art student, to go ahead and forge ahead knowing that peril is out there, must just have tremendous self-confidence and confidence in his or her chops to get through those rough times. And is that true of you?
No,
I mean, it's not.
I think what I experienced was that I just didn't want to do anything else. It had nothing to do with confidence.
Yeah.
It was more like, well, if I become a business person, I'll be eaten alive in the first week. I knew that. And or law or any of those sort of professional worlds, I just knew, boy, those people scare me. I'm terrified of those worlds. So I think that for me, partly it was just a survival, like an emotional, spiritual survival path more than anything. I had great doubts, and as I said, I still have doubts about my abilities. And so I don't think it was like, yeah, I can do it. I mean, of course, I think there was I think part of me was probably naively cocky. That may have been necessary. I'm not sure. But no, I would not have described myself as confident.
Okay. You describe Semisonic taking its step in those early days. You describe it in the book as an enormous and foolish gamble starting off. I mean,
Yeah.
but it sounds like and one of my students, Josie from Ainsworth, who is a lead guitarist in her own right, go Josie, asks that question. Did the lack of security in pursuing a career in music scare you initially? But it sounds like you were more scared of the potential alternative of having to enter the business world, so to speak.
Well, so I was scared of both, but the scared the different episodes of being scared happened at different times. So when I
Okay.
first just decided, hey, I'm going to learn how to write songs, and I'll become a great singer songwriter, and somehow I'll become a professional musician. It was in that context where I was like, I know I can't work in a corporate environment. I will just disintegrate. I will be
Mm-hmm.
destroyed by that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then when Semisonic came along, and I really now, hey, we're getting somewhere, and I was up on stage in front of real crowds on a regular basis, I thought, oh my God, I have horribly miscalculated. I will never be able to survive the pressure of being a performer and being looked at and evaluated by record company people. I mean, that was so scary. And I really wanted to quit. I almost quit, actually. I had a
Mm-hmm.
few phone calls with friends, and because of the stage fright was so com- uh, just all encompassing and uh, um, really intolerable that there was a point at which I thought I just can't do this. I made a terrible mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, I sort of held on through that, and then the good things happened.
Right, right. Uh, did you, as you were embarking on a music career, did you enjoy familial and friend support to go down that path? Initially, asked Claire of Burwell and Renahi of Iraq.
Um,
I know your father was an experimental solid state physicist and
yeah,
professor at the U of Illinois. Your mother was a PhD in history. What a wonderful liberal arts blend right in the family.
yeah. I mean, and also some of the imposter syndrome was like right there. Like, oh Jesus, I'm never gonna be. I just could never see myself getting a doctorate in anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, I think that uh, I did have support. I mean, I absolutely had support. I think, my parents were justifiably like, by the time I was like 28, 29, 30, they're sort of quietly like, "Hi, honey. How's it going?" you know? And I'd be like, "Oh, it's great. I don't know, leave me alone." And then finally Semisonic came, and I think there was a sigh of relief. So there was support, and I think there was also concern. And I had friends who supported me. I think part of having imposter syndrome is always wondering if your friends really see everything.
mm-hmm.
Like everybody has the friend who says, "Oh, he's totally into you. She's totally into you. They're totally into you." Like ask them out on a date, and you're like, actually, they're not totally into me. And so everybody has their friends who are like their cheerleaders, and sometimes we wonder if our cheerleaders are really sort of seeing everything that we see.
Mm-hmm.
But I have always, I think, just in direct answer to the question, have always felt very lucky in terms of support.
Mm-hmm. And I love the moment in your book where you're in college and you and Dan meet for the first time, and he hears you from behind the door playing drums and sticks his head in and says, "I'll be right back with my bass."
Yeah.
Uh, did you, was it that effortless? You guys just hit it off, and was it not only musically but a couple of Midwestern guys at Harvard connecting that way? College is a conduit to meet great people.
I mean, I think at first it was just like a musical connection. And
Mm-hmm.
like Dan both of us had some funk chops. and which were not widely present at Harvard, if that can be imagined.
What were some of those jobs?
Well, Dan was like a weather report fan,
Mm-hmm.
and like and a so a Jocko fan,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a fretless bass, and he could get around on it. And he had a really solid groove on the bass, and I just had really, one of the things that I had really worked on as a drummer up to that point was just really having the sweetest possible groove. And I think
Yeah.
that if you're a bass player with a good ear for rhythm, that's something you're always on the lookout for, and the same on the drums. So I think that we just sort of connected on that level at first. We weren't really super close friends until the very end of college.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I've always been impressed by Semisonic, seemingly very literate, independent thinking group. I mean, you and Afro-American Studies, Dan and Art, Dan Wilson from Semisonic, John Munson, band member, major in Chinese at the University of Minneapolis. I mean, that's a fairly unique blend in rock, wouldn't you say?
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know the sort of college. I haven't seen the diplomas of the various
Mm-hmm.
people I met
Mm-hmm.
on the road, but like, there's a lot of nerds in the music world.
Mm-hmm.
So like, if you go backstage at a show and you see the musicians, there's so many of them are reading books, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just kind of like, I think a lot of the people who look cool on stage actually in college and high school were kind of like quiet and nerdy and kind of kept to themselves. Very few of them were really sort of dynamic social presences in the cafeteria and, you know, in school assemblies or anything like that. I think a lot of them were just kind of like, just want to kind of nerd out on their music stuff. And
Sure.
so I think that it's actually, in my experience, it's pretty typical that people in a band would just be off into their own like weird stuff, or
Right.
like
Right.
weird by in terms of what the world would label weird, not
Right.
necessarily
Right.
actually weird. Because I
Absolutely.
mean, for instance, studying art, studying Chinese history, studying Afro-American studies, that's all pretty basic stuff, and it's actually all pretty essential stuff, but it just gets called weird.
Hmm.
Um, whereas if you study economics, people say, well, that's practical, um,
Right.
which it may be, but I think the other things are actually also practical.
I do too. Today more than ever.
Yeah.
Jake, what's it like teaching college classes now? And do your students ask you about your music life? I remember years ago when we talked, and you told me that you knew that your concept of being an English teacher that saves the day and defies all odds was a romantic one. But that's what you said back then. But do you like the challenge of helping your students have a better college experience than yours was?
Totally. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
my mission from the very first was to be the professor I had always wanted. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a professor who listens. That's a professor who advocates for his students and tries to get on their side and affirm their struggles and their talents both, and tries to connect them with what they already have learned and just helps them learn. So I think teaching is just the greatest thing, and I feel so lucky to have the chance to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do your students ask you about your music life?
Some do, a lot. I think a lot of them don't even know really. They'll hear me say I was a musician, but more than that, they really don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't tell them because it's not really the particular my particular history in the music business is not necessarily relevant to what they need to know. I mean, sometimes I'll often share analogs between music and writing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think they really get a lot out of that, because I think most of us have done a lot more listening than we have reading. And
Hmm.
if you're
Hmm.
learning how to write, reading is the core skill. So you have to draw upon another skill you have, which is listening.
Right.
Um, so I try to give them some labels to put on what they've learned as listeners without even knowing it.
Very good. I love a section of your book, and I bet this comes up in class too when you're talking about things that students can do better and ways to improve. We talk about this in my class too, about not getting hung up on mistakes, or we call it reframing failure, so to speak, or what might initially appear to be failure. You deal with this in the book in a musical context where you talk about the recording process and not seeing every last little blemish as a blemish at all, but in fact something really cool. And you even mentioned how when you were too conscious of playing error free, that contributed to the blandness of your bandmates playing then. So it was
Right.
really failure is something to see in a different way. Is that musical context, I think, is a good one to extrapolate a greater moral lesson from, just in that mistakes are part of the process and not to anguish over.
Yeah, and I think actually sometimes mistakes are not even mistakes in retrospect.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that one of the challenging things about music and art and writing and things like that is they are not subjects that in which you can make a lot of objective statements. You can't really say that's good and that's bad. There's no such
Right.
that's not really a meaningful phrase. I mean, you can
That's
say,
why I'm
well,
interested in those disciplines. There's no right answer.
there isn't, but there are productive answers.
Hmm.
So I think that the challenge is to find ways to talk about things in productive ways. So, for instance, when you're listening back to a take, as when we would Semisonic would record a song and or record a few takes of a song, and we'd go into the control room and listen. You can't really say that's better, that's worse. You can say this groove does not feel focused. This one really has my attention. My mind
Hmm.
wandered during that last take. Um, this one feels hesitant. Um, you can start to sort of make observations like that, and those are really important kinds of observations because that it's a record of how your consciousness processed what you had
Hmm.
in front of you. So, learning how to articulate your experience as a listener is a really crucial skill for a musician. Um, it's different from saying this is good or bad. It's actually more demanding. I think this is
Hmm.
good, that's bad is actually kind of not working very hard.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Hang a label on it.
well, yeah, and I think that our culture is I think we are generally over competent in offering opinions and judgments, and we are far less skilled in the area of articulating what happened in us when we watched something or read something or listened to something. So that's what I try to develop in my writing students is the ability to understand what happened as they read. Oh, I was
Hmm.
pulled in here. Why was that? Well, there was, this sentence was so short at the very beginning, and it really hit me hard. I think because of the brevity, and then the next sentence was sort of took me into it, and I started to understand the narrator's struggle here. Blah 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 blah. So that you're actually playing back a slow motion replay of what happened as you read. And so
Hmm.
I think like being able to do that as a listener is really important. I think being able to
Hmm.
do that as an art student is really important. Instead of the normal art crits where you bring a piece in and say, I don't like it. I'd get rid of this. I'd do something else. You can just say, well, when I looked at this part, I thought maybe it connected to that part, but then on further thinking about it, I understood that maybe it was supposed to relate down to the thing at the bottom. So
Hmm.
you're really starting to sort of replay in your mind how your mind works. I think that's, for instance, a really kind of important skill to develop in a field where objective statements are really hard to come by.
Right. I agree. And it's and much more helpful for your students too,
Yeah.
frankly. I
Yeah.
think as developing writers. Jake, I want to come back to something that we alluded to earlier and that you speak about frequently in the book as well, and that is the horror of working a day job in your career before you took your step musically. That just really resonated with me because I've had a zillion crappy jobs in my life, and you use phrases like day job misery, basement anonymity, the long road from the copy machine to the stage and screen, which I just love. And if I could read a portion here as well. As I lay in bed at night, I'd hear another page turning off of my life shortening calendar. The mantle of failure weighed on me, no place more than at my day job downtown, where I attended to the photocopying and envelope stuffing needs of executives who sold retirement plans. And we've been talking a lot in class just now about vocational outlook, regardless of what you might major in, but comparing professional perspectives and outlooks in regard to, are you reaching for a dream job or just a day job, or daydream or meaningful work? Are day jobs just a rite of passage to reach your dream job, especially for artists?
Well, they can be. I think that first I want to clarify that really the misery of working my day job was not so much the conditions at my day job. It was more just like um, nobody sees me as a musician.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody believes in me. And I think really the subtext to that was, I don't believe in me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So I think that
Yeah.
it's one of the challenges of working a day job is you have to find a way to believe in yourself enough that you can put yourself in that place and do that work. So I think like one thing that I tell my students, especially my graduating seniors who are undergraduates, is that the first few years out of college are always difficult. And they're difficult because in college you have this structure, and you have your classes, you have to do your schoolwork, you go here, you see your friends there. If you're living on campus, all of that has been sorted out. Where you get your meals has also maybe been sorted
Got a
out. So
routine.
you've got a routine and a structure, and then they give you a diploma and kick you out into the world, and you land, and suddenly you've got to find a place to live, a way to pay for that. You've got to sort of start organizing all of the stuff that other people were taking care of for you, and especially just giving a shape to your day. And so it actually, people think, well, I'll just first month I'll find a job. Second, first I'll find an apartment with a little bit of savings. Month two, I'll find a job. Month three,
Mm-hmm.
I'll start taking, night classes and blah blah blah. And it just doesn't go that way. You
Mm-hmm.
get out there and you're getting your ass kicked, and what happens is you start to think it's all your fault. You
Mm-hmm.
start to think I suck. And especially because there's just always one classmate who is an instant star. They're just a success. They're on the cover of some magazine, and everybody at every party you go to, everybody's talking about that person. And it eats away at your soul, and you just think I am so terrible. I'm so awful. And I think the thing that you've really got to do is you've got to anticipate this. You've got to know that it's coming so that when it does come, you know that you didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The only person who did anything wrong is the whole world for creating a system like this,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like kicked to the curb from college, and now with intolerable amounts of debt, I might add. Um, and so I think it's really important for people to understand that if they're finding that it's hard, it's because it is hard. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with them. This is just
Right.
like it's a crappy system. It's a crappy structure, and that's part of how it goes. Especially if you're going to be an artist in a field like music, where sometimes you get paid and most of the time you don't, or even more so in a field like poetry, where even the most successful poets, the best thing they can hope for is a job teaching poetry. Like, when was the last time you saw a poet interviewed on a late night show,
Hmm.
or on the cover of People? We're just not
Right,
that kind of
right,
society, unfortunately. So, but that
right.
doesn't mean becoming a poet is not a entirely worthy pursuit. It's an awesome pursuit.
This is the
Um,
land of Ted Kooser around here, so
oh,
I
Ted
relate.
Kooser. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Jake, I found myself as I reread your book, building on a little bit of what we're talking about here. I found myself just sort of instinctually getting mad at higher ups or engineers, even in the book, that would appear and weren't paying deference to you guys, the artists. And it made me think too of maybe a similar dynamic in my world, in the higher ed world, and probably many disciplines where administrators or higher ups have undue control or power or more compensation instead of the artists or the teachers. And then I thought about the subtitle of your book, How I Machine Gunned a Room Full of Record Executives and Other True Tales from a Drummer's Life. So you must feel somewhat similarly on this. How have we come to this place in society where that's the arrangement? That's an impossible question to answer, but
Well, I think that I am reminded of when people say, "Well, what do you think about Spotify? What do you think about you know all of that?" And and what are musicians going to do about that? And how can musicians get paid? And um, I think what it says is that the problems of any particular sector of our society are generally the problems of the entire society.
yeah, yeah.
So consolidation of power is what you were describing,
Hmm. Hmm.
both in the music business, in the world of academia, in all of entertainment, in any industry you want to describe. We accept that, and I think that until we learn to start questioning whether or not we're going to accept that a few people get to control a lot of other people, it's going to stay that way. So I
Hmm.
think that's why college is important, because we get to, we get to ask important questions like that. So, I think that I agree. That's how I experience academia too. Like,
Right.
um, teachers, the people who really control universities right now are the donors. Um,
Yeah.
the donors get to pick the president, and uh, the president, college presidents, and provosts largely do the bidding of the people who are writing the checks. I actually
Absolutely
I
true.
can't blame them for doing that. I mean, there's a certain sort of just no nonsense, self-preservation that's involved in that. But if we really want to change the world, then we have to think about what we're willing to do about a system that is sort of created that way.
Well said. Jake, to achieve the kind of mass success that Semisonic has, that takes the contributions of a lot of people beyond the band. Is it ever, as someone that's a basement enthusiast, you started doing your home recording in the basement, just like I still do. Is it hard to abdicate control to outside people, and sometimes even artistic control, even though you know that when you do that and you collaborate in that way, often it leads to greater things than yourself? But is it hard to abdicate, relinquish control to that many people?
Yeah, I think that actually the hardest step is just joining a band.
Uh-huh.
Like when you're the only person in your bedroom doing the
Yeah,
recording,
yeah,
you get to make every call. You get to say, no, I'm going to
yeah.
use this lyric instead of that lyric, and the melody is going to go this way, and I'm going to record it at this tempo with this drum beat. And then you get into a band, and suddenly those very fundamental decisions are now a group decision.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually the almost the most difficult threshold is getting into a band and staying in a band. I think the average lifespan of a band is like one gig. Um,
Yeah.
So I think that once you've made it into a band and an ensemble, and you're working together and collaborating together, you've started to train yourself in what trust can get you. So like if you're willing to trust your bandmates, and that's really the only band you should be in, but if you
Hmm.
can trust them the way I can trust my bandmates, then all of a sudden all kinds of sort of powerful ideas become accessible.
Yeah,
And so
all
you've got
kinds
to
of
like,
magical things.
yeah, you got to really open up. And so, Nick Launay, the guy who produced our second album, he really pushed
Hmm.
us on some things. And nobody wants to be pushed. I mean, we all say we do. We all say, "Oh, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm gonna really max it out." But people show up for day one. They don't really like going back for day two or beyond.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but the right kind of pushing will keep you coming back. And
Hmm.
so you just have to kind of know when you're being pushed by someone, your intuition says, this person knows what I need. It's a good thing I'm
Right.
with them. And then
Right.
there's other kind of pushing where your intuition might say, this person doesn't get me. I need to get out of here. So all I can say is you kind of have to listen to your intuition, and then afterwards you have to evaluate how well your intuition led you. Sometimes you need to recalibrate. I thought it was going to be okay and it turned out terrible, or I thought that person was terrible and now I hear other work they've done and I kind of regret that I didn't work with them. Um, so
Trust is really at the core of this, isn't it? Yeah.
it really is. I mean, I think that trust is a muscle you build by using it. You know,
Hmm.
you
Oh,
can't.
well said.
It's like people say trust but verify, and I think that's actually not trusting. That's just being a control freak. I think that
Yeah.
to really trust someone, you have to kind of let go. And the way I would
Allow
say
for some vulnerability,
you
maybe.
have to offer a little bit of vulnerability and see what happens.
Hmm.
And for good reason,
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
you want to start, just like any kind of weightlifting, you want to start with the lowest amount of weight on the barbell. So trust with a little
Hmm.
thing and see what happens. And if it works out all
Hmm.
right, try trusting with a slightly bigger thing. Um,
Right, right.
and see where your limits are. But I think trust in a band is, you can't not have it. If you don't have
Hmm.
trusts in your bandmates, you shouldn't be in that band.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Jake, your Semisonic's 2020 EP, "You're Not Alone," was released on vinyl, and I know that's not the precedent. "Feeling Strangely Fine" has been reissued on vinyl as well. But I'd like to know more what was behind the decision to release on vinyl, knowing that many of the students listening to us today have never owned a CD player in their life, much less a turntable. And for them, music isn't a material thing in that sense, but it sure pleased the old farts like me to have that record on vinyl. Specifically, the center label does not list the tracks. You have to count the grooves on the record to know whether you're playing side A or side B. That was the coolest thing I've seen in a year. That just delighted me. I want to know where that came from and what your angle is on this about releasing music. Some people would say in antiquated formats.
Well, interestingly, I think it was a purely crass commercial decision. I think that vinyl
Hmm.
actually outsells any other form of physical music.
Hmm.
Um, at least this
It's
is what
my
I'm.
main
Yeah, I think that
platform.
people who are going to buy a hard copy of something now don't buy CDs; they buy
Yes,
vinyl.
that's right. Right. If
So
they, yeah, otherwise all download. Oh.
yeah, most people just don't. Most computers, for instance, don't even come with a disk drive anymore.
Hmm.
You have to
Hmm.
get like extra weird equipment to connect you back to the past decade to even get a CD track into your um, phone or whatever means you're going to listen to it on. So
Yeah.
I think that we, I don't know that we were necessarily thinking like go vinyl. I think John is a
Uh-huh.
big fan of vinyl. I don't own a
Yeah.
turntable. That's because my wife and I live in this tiny apartment in Brooklyn, and there's just like the 18 square inches a turntable might take up is like kind of hard to find here. So, but I mean, I've held on to vinyl with the idea that at some time, if we ever move to a different place where we have a little more space, maybe I'll get a turntable. But I think our decision was purely it was purely the record companies saying, yeah, well, we'll want to make sure to have vinyl because people are buying vinyl.
Okay.
So
I'm
maybe that's
delighted
good news
about it.
for vinyl
However,
lovers. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Very good. You mentioned living in Brooklyn, and you've lived in New York for some time now. What's your favorite thing about living there?
Oh, I love a big city. I love a lot of
Hmm.
people. I love being around the energy. It's also kind of exhausting. I mean, I would say if you were to do a pros and cons list of living in New York, a lot of the pros would be a lot of the cons. Big
Mm.
place, lots of people.
Yeah.
That's the top of the pros list. It's also kind of top of the cons list. Like, oh my God, so many people. I got to get out of here. I need to get to the beach or the woods or something. So, but I think, New York has so many amazing things. Everything that I can imagine wanting is here, music, bookstores, colleges. My wife and I live across the street from Prospect Park, which is a big park in Brooklyn, and it's glorious. You can take a four
Hmm.
mile walk in the park. And so I've always loved New York and its vibe. Um, I can't really even, I never really sort of made a list of why I wanted to live here. I just knew it. It's just sort of like, when you meet someone and you think this is the one, and that when I
Hmm.
met New
Hmm.
York, I kind of felt like, yeah, this is the one for me. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how it is.
What do you miss most about the Midwest and or Minneapolis?
Well, I miss my friends the most.
Hmm.
Um, I miss the sort of vast horizon, being able to watch a thunderstorm come in 2 hours before it hits.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up with that, and I've always loved that. I miss Sometimes I miss the sort of the more demarcated sense of seasons.
Hmm.
We get seasons here, but not like you do, say, in Minnesota or Illinois. Um, so yeah, I would say mainly my friends, but then also just sort of the land features of the Midwest that you kind of have to almost be born there to get it. But I
Hmm.
was, brought up in the Midwest, so I did get it.
You talk a bit in the book about losing your cocoon of Midwest humility for perhaps a little more swagger in your step. Losing is my term,
Yeah, yeah.
but what do you mean by that? I think I know what you mean, but
Well, I think that I think in the Midwest you're sort of really trained to just really talk yourself down. Talk.
hmm,
You know.
that's the negative side of humility, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I read a great Phillips Brooks quote the other day. Let me see if I can find it. I love this. Hold on a second. Okay. The true way to be humble is not to stoop until you were smaller than yourself, but to stand at your real height against some higher nature that will show you what the real smallness of your greatness is.
Wow, that's tremendous.
Yeah,
Who said that?
Phillips Brooks. Here, I'll put it in the chat, and you can share it if you feel so
Please
inclined.
do. Please do. That's wonderful. Jake,
Um,
I
yeah.
go ahead.
No, no, no.
Yeah, I know some of this, but it's a standard question in our broadcast interviews. What are your own artistic tastes in music, film, literature? Do you read more fiction or nonfiction? And any desert island books, records that you could name?
Well, my desert island records would be the Stevie Wonder solo albums of the early 70s, especially Music of My Mind, Talking Book, um, Intervisions, and Fulfilling This First Finale. And then if I were going to add on to that, it might be the Joni Mitchell records, Clouds, Blue, Cord and Spark, and Hejira.
Very good. Any Spinners records in there?
Well, for sure. I mean, desert island. My main thing
Yeah,
about being on
yeah.
a desert island is it's not going to be a desert island. It's going to be like a, you know, but I mean, I like quieter things. I like
Yeah,
quieter, more interior things. So that's what I notice about Stevie Wonder and about Joni Mitchell and about the Spinners even. There's a sort of sublimeness to those Spinners hits. It's just a little bit more inside. It's not as sort of projected outwardly. It's just a little bit more in your head. Um, and my favorite books would be, sort of similarly introspective. Um, the essays of James Baldwin would be high on my lists.
right,
Movie
right.
wise, things like The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, which is like a very interior portrait of a kid on the streets of Paris. I think in the 50s or 60s, and
I only know Fahrenheit 451 that he did in '66, I think. So I don't know more than
okay,
that, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, The 400 Blows is quite wonderful. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I like. I like quieter, like weird,
Yeah.
quiet things.
You,
So,
you've had a lot of loudness in your life,
well,
being
for
on
sure.
stage, playing to people. So that seems understandable as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that I play the loudest instrument and I like quiet things,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I do.
Hmm. Very good. Uh, May we finish up, Jake? We only have a
Sure,
5 minutes or so left, but with some one-off questions from students, if we may.
absolutely.
And some of these might be shorter answer questions, but I'll start with a good one. And this probably isn't a short answer one, but Haley of Elkhorn, and Haley is a bassoonist in the music school, but she's also an aspiring pediatrician, and she wants to know how your writing complements your music, and how do you make time for both?
Great question. I would say everything I know about writing, I brought over from music.
Hmm.
Um, um, I would say that. Hold on a second. I'm going to post a link in which I've sort of written about that question because I think it's an important question. So if Haley or anybody else is interested, they can check it out. Um, I would say, how do I make time for both? Um, I think that what I try to do is just I'm good at like having little charts in which I like uh, charts in which I track my practice time and my writing days, and I just try to make sure that I hit a little bit of it every day.
Hmm.
So that's a link to the essay about practicing drums and writing, which maybe
Yes.
I think even if you're a bassoonist or whatever instrument you play, it'll make sense.
I know this essay from Portable Philosophy. It is
Yeah.
indeed a good one. Very good. And speaking of which, I've got a number of music students in my courses, Jake, that are all following you. Xander of Rock Hill, South Carolina, Grant of Omaha, and fellow drummers, Alex of Papillion, Trent of Gretna, Luke of Lincoln, are
Wow.
all very appreciative of the work that you do as a drummer, and really interested in your approach that way. So thank you therein. Xander of Geneva has a really interesting question. What's your favorite Semisonic song?
Oh, that is a good question. I think I've always liked Made to Last, which is on our
Okay.
second album. I think I like the songs of ours that have a sort of melancholy side to them, but also just feel insistently like they're moving forward emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I connect with that song. So I've always loved that song, Made to Last.
That question is an easy answer for me. It's the very first Semisonic song I ever heard, and you weren't called Semisonic then; you were called Pleasure. And I heard it in sound check at the Bottleneck Tavern in Lawrence, Kansas, on a sunny afternoon in May 1994. Falling has always been
Oh yeah.
my favorite track, and at the time, Trip Shakespeare had just broken up not so long before, and I was distraught. And I went to see the new group, and I thought, as soon as I heard the backing vocals on the chorus of "Falling" from you and John, I knew everything was going to be okay.
That's a
And
very Beach Boysy kind of, I think, inspired song. So it totally makes
that
sense
explains it.
that would connect with you.
Oh, I remember vividly when I heard that sound check song. So, Jake, one final question for you, if we may. And Jen of Omaha prompts us here. A question about what lies ahead for you. And I know that you've got a new book coming out. I know Semisonic has been doing some recording, so hopefully some music coming down the pike. I know that you have a book coming out as well, and I've seen some other interviews where you are hesitant to reveal any contents of that book. So I'm pleased to offer you, Jake, the opportunity again here on BroadCAST to give us a tidbit, keeping in mind that one of the attributes of great Nebraskans is we are great secret keepers.
Of course. No, I
And
know.
in fact, my students are part of the Nebraska Promise program. So your secret is safe with us.
Wow. Well, with that assurance, I can say that yeah, I'm working on another book. It's a memoir. It's about religion. Um,
Okay.
and Semisonic is working on another batch of songs that I think it would probably be accurate to say that it's likely to become an album, but we're not yet at the point of sort of knowing what we've got. So we're making it,
Mm-hmm.
but we're definitely, we had a great time releasing that EP and recording it, and we want to keep that going. I think a part of like what lies ahead is making our way from pandemic to endemic COVID and
Mm.
what that looks like for all of us. So I think that at a certain point we'll be playing shows, and but it's not going to be. It's not. We canceled some shows that we were going to play in September because it just felt too dangerous. So
Mm-hmm.
from a public health citizenship kind of
Sure.
perspective. So
Right.
I would say those are sort of the general things that are on the horizon. I hope to keep teaching. I'm an adjunct, so my contracts are renewed year to year. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm hesitant to sort of make bold predictions about how much longer I'll be teaching, but I hope it's a long time because I love
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Like the song goes, I hope it lasts a long, long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Jake, it is just a tremendous honor to be here with you. I can't overstate that. You're
Well,
one of my idols, and it's just tremendously generous of you to spend some time with us here today.
thank you so much, and thank you so much to you and to Lori and to all of the students, and thank you for such really interesting questions and the conversation that all of it sort of produced. I'm really grateful for that.
Well, it's my pleasure, and we really look forward to the new book, new music from Semisonic, some shows potentially. My very best to you and your wife, to Dan and John as well. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.